Welcome back to Cassandra's Bible Corner and our series, Through New Eyes. This series is based on a collection of books that I'm writing, each focusing on a different Bible character, unpacking their lives, struggles, and deeper lessons we can all apply today. And we're starting this series off with Jonah. This study is based on my book, I Would Rather Die, Jonah and the Great City of Nineveh, and its accompanying journal, Stepping into Scripture, a Journal for the Soul. So, if you're ready to see Jonah's story through new eyes, let's dive in. If you haven't watched chapter 1, be sure to check it out. Today, we're exploring chapter 2, which is the Great City of Nineveh. To fully grasp Jonah's resistance, we need to understand where he was sent. Nineveh wasn't just another foreign city. There was lots of foreign cities to the Israelites. It was the capital of the Assyrian Empire, the most powerful and feared nation of its time. Nineveh origins trace back to Nimrod, which is the great-grandson of Noah. That's in Genesis 10, verse 8 to 12. So Nimrod is described and called a mighty hunter before the Lord, a phrase that implies, he has strength, he's powerful, he's a go-getter. When you think about somebody hunting, they're tracking something down, they're in pursuit, they are trying to have some attainment. So he was a mighty hunter before the Lord, which implies physical strength and also conquest, leadership, aggression. He is credited with building the first major cities in human civilization, including Babel, Erech, and Nineveh. And if you remember Babel, that's the Great Tower of Babel, when we hear about them building a tower up to the heavens so that they can be near to God. We're not going to get into that story now, but this is the same Nimrod being credited with those cities as well as the city we're discussing here, Nineveh. So Nimrod's legacy was one of rebellion and ambition. His cities became centers of human pride and defiance against God. So who he was, who he embodied, his characteristics, his personality, this is what these cities then became. Babel became Babylon, and we have Nineveh we're talking about here. So that city was built on this defiance, this rebellion, this, aggression. This is how this city was built. Its characteristics, what it's known for, what it's founded on, its foundation. So that knowing that piece of information helps to bring into light the kind of tone that we're getting from this city. So what was so great about this city? It was called the Great City of Nineveh. So in Jonah's time, or by Jonah's time, Nineveh was a thriving metropolis, unrivaled, in size and wealth. It was one of the largest cities of the ancient world, covering about 100 kilometers or 60 miles in circumference. Its walls were so massive, it was said that 3 chariots could ride side by side along the top. So the top of the wall, think about a chariot, how big a chariot was, how wide a chariot was, the size of the wheels that would have to go on a chariot to be able to withstand certain terrains and go over bodies. That's, you had to have strong iron wheels. And then after the wheels, they would have spears on the ends of them. So these are wide mechanisms. And then you have 3 of them side by side that could run along the tops of the walls. Nineveh was also home to grand palaces, elaborate gardens, sophisticated irrigation system, libraries, all the kinds of things that you could think of was here in this city. After all, it was the capital. And if you think no king is going to claim a place as their capital if it's not the best. So Nineveh had all the grandeur, it had all the wealth, it had all the splendor that one could want at that time That was what was in the city of Nineveh. It was also where it was located as well. It was located a crossroads across major trade routes connecting the Mediterranean, Egypt, India, and Persia. So it's situated right in a nice hub to be connected to different cities, be able to have trade coming in and out. So it had the best of everything that needed to be there. So it was a great city. So to understand Jonah's reluctance, we have to understand who Nineveh was to Israel. So Nineveh wasn't just another foreign city. Of course, Israel has a lot of foreign cities. Anybody who is not an Israelite is a foreign city. But Nineveh wasn't just another foreign city. They were the capital of Israel's worst nightmare, the Assyrian Empire. Right? So the Assyrians were infamous military power known for their cruelty, psychological welfare, and relentless conquest. Relentless means coming after another, after another, after another. They were always on the warpath, always on the attack. Just campaign and conquest after another. You didn't even have time to recover from the last one. So why were the Assyrians Israel's sworn enemy? The Assyrians were brutal conquerors, and they had their sights set on Israel. They had already began expanded their control over the region, taking smaller nations captive, and eventually, after Jonah's time, they would invade and destroy the northern kingdom of Israel in 722 BC, carrying thousands away into exile into Babylon. And that was the great enslavement when they were into exile a second time. They all went over into Babylon. This is that time, and it was through the Assyrian Empire, but they destroyed the temple. All of that happened, but I'm not going to get too deep in that. That's not what this class is about. In 2 Kings 18, verse 13 to 14, it tells us how King Sennacherib of Assyria attacked and demanded heavy tribute from Judah, and how some of the prophets talked about Assyria. Nahum describes Nineveh as a bloody city full of lies and robbery. That's in Nahum 3, verse 1 to 3. And Isaiah, he warns that Assyria is like a raging river that will overflow and destroy. Isaiah 8, verse 7 to 8. So they use Assyria, they use terror to control people. The kings would boast of the ways that they would torture their captives. And I'm actually going to pause for a moment and read an excerpt from my book talking about how the Assyrians would do their conquest. And just as a warning, this section might get a little graphic. So if there are young children, parental guidance can be activated. So Nineveh was built on a city of violence and fear. The Assyrians were infamous for their cruelty and relentless military conquest. Their ruthless tactics, such as flaying people alive, impaling captives, burning cities to the ground, and enslaving entire populations, were more than acts of war. They were deliberate strategies of terror. These brutal methods crushed forbearance, struck fear into neighboring nations, and cemented Assyrian dominance. So when you think about this, about flaying people alive, and flaying is another word for skinning, right? So if you think about, you have a fish, you fillet a fish, you take off, the skins, remove the bones, and then you're just going to have sort of like the meat there. You're flaying it, taking it off. So what they would do when they would flay people alive, it's basically skinning them. So either you're taking knives and you're tearing off or cutting or ripping skin off of people's bodies. And these are not people who are dead that they're doing this to. They're doing this to people that are alive. After they captured them, they had a conquest, they captured them. And instead of just letting them die or just killing them, which they are going to do anyways, they decide that they want to torture them before they kill them. And they come up with these unimaginable things that you want to do to another human, of tearing off their skin off their body while they're still alive. Talk about impaling. Impaling is taking an object, whether it's a spear or a stick or a pole or whatever it is, putting it one end of a person all the way up to the other end of a person. If you think about a shish kebab, something on a stick, this is exactly the same thing, but it would be humans that they would be doing this to. So they would impale their captives, their victims, and parade them, put them up, and parade them around the city like they're works of art or something to be proud of or something to brag about. They would put these images out at the city gates, so those who are coming into the city had an idea of what they were coming and walking into. They were proud of what it is that they were doing. They would put their skulls at the gates as well. They would burn cities. They would kill babies. They would capture people. So those who they weren't killing, they would capture them and they would enslave them and put them to work in either of their other cities, or they would just make sure that they're there to build these other cities or towns so they can be even bigger or even be even greater. So this is what Assyria was doing. They were conquering region after region, nation after nation, area after area, and just going, and exacting all of this chaos and unimaginable things that they were doing to their captives. And this is what was known to Jonah, and why he was so determined that he was not going to go to preach to these people. If you could really imagine what that would look like or feel like, he didn't want to go to deliver a message. It's like, who would want to? That's like going and finding the worst of the worst of the worst people who do it, crimes that are beyond humanity. And then we're saying we want you to go and tell them that God loves you, that God is going to deliver you, God is going to save you, that God forgives you, all the things. This is what Jonah was practically being asked to do. And he was just thinking, no, they don't need to be saved. They don't need to find grace. They need judgment. The same way that they were doing to their victims, that's exactly what needs to happen to them. Nobody wants to hear that, they're going to have a minute chance that they're going to say, I'm sorry, God, please forgive me. And then all would be clear, all would be washed away, all would be made new, all would be forgotten. Jonah doesn't want that. He wants retribution. He wants to see them punished the way that they were punishing other peoples. That's the human side to us. We want to see that happen. We don't want to hear just someone gets forgiven and then they move on with life. We want to see something happen to them. So to Jonah, this is what was happening, and this is who the people were, and this is where he was going. So Jonah was like, I know God is a God of love. I know he's a God of mercy. And just that small chance, even if it's a 0.1% chance that Nineveh might turn, it is too much of a chance. I don't even want to take it. I don't want that to even happen. They can burn, they can die. I don't care what happens to them. They deserve everything that is going to that is coming their way. But he doesn't want to be part of any kind of revival that is going to happen for them. So Jonah wasn't just uncomfortable with the idea. He was outraged. Like, how could God? Why would God? Why would he even give them the time of day? Why would he even think about them, that he wanted to give them mercy? Why would he spend any time worrying about people who are not even worrying about him, who cannot care less about him? Because if they're Israel's enemies, that means they're God's enemies. And Jonah could not wrap his head around, why would God want to save these people. They are lower than low. They're beneath, some people say they're beneath the bottoms of the earth. They are nobody that anybody should be considering. So Jonah didn't want them to have any kind of chance or any kind of second chance. So from Jonah's hometown, if we think about now the journey, the travel of this, Jonah's hometown of Gath Hepher, which is in Israel, to Nineveh, the journey covers over 800 kilometers or over 500 miles. And for us Canadians, that's distance going from Toronto to Quebec City, right? That's the distance. Walking, that's the distance. Or for Americans or internationals, that's the distance from New York to Ohio. Walking from New York to Ohio. That's the distance that Jonah is being asked to go. So this is out without modern transportation, modern roads, anything like that. Jonah would be forced to endure the scorching sun, rugged terrain, unpredictable weather, and constant threat of bandits. This is all what God is asking him to do. These are the parts that we don't think about. We don't, stop to put into our minds. We just hear that God said, go to Nineveh, and not taking the time to count the cost of what does it mean to go to Nineveh. This is what it means to go to Nineveh. This journey that Jonah would have to take on foot, he was traveling alone. He may have had an animal or some kind of beast, whether it's a donkey, a horse, a camel, whatever it is, but he's going alone. And this journey would have taken about a month on foot to get to Nineveh. So here's Jonah. He already is angry. He's already upset, but he has a month to stew on this, a month to think about, why am I doing this? Why am I going? Why is God doing this? Why is he sending me? A whole month, just anger bubbling up, rage just bubbling up. Everything is just, there, no outlet is happening. So you can imagine by the time he gets to Nineveh, what he's feeling and what's going on. Well, we'll cover that a little bit later. But he has all this time and he's going it alone. God didn't even give him a companion. He didn't say, okay, you two go to Nineveh, or you three, or you group of people go over to Nineveh. He just told him to do this alone on his own. Can you imagine the emotional, the mental state that he's in, the physical trip? This is a very laborious trip that he has to go to. He has to endure this journey. So even before delivering God's message, Jonah has to face the challenge of getting there. And who would be willing to make such a sacrifice? You know, especially when it costs you personally, not to mention you're doing all of this for people that you do not like, for people that you hate, for people that you couldn't care less about. You are going and extending yourself to this level for people that you do not like, that you don't even want to go talk to. This is the reality, and this is the weight of Jonah's journey and the call that God has placed on Jonah's life. So if we think for a moment, like, who would want to do this? Nobody in their right mind would want to do something like this or would want to go. Yet we love to pick on Jonah. We love to say, oh, Jonah is just rebellious and, all that stuff. Yes, that is true. But this is the reality of what he was facing. This is the truth of what he was facing. It was hard. God asked him a hard thing, a difficult thing. Not only was it difficult mentally, physically, it was a difficult thing. And you think, who could do this or who would want to do this? And the only person who has done this is Jesus. The Bible says, while we were yet sinners, not when we were good, not when we were perfect, not when we were all cleaned up, while we were sinners, while we were the Nineveh, while we were the evil ones, while we were the scum of the earth, while we were the dogs, and while we were the sorcerers, while we were the ones that, nobody cared about, wanted to save, while we were those people, Christ died for us. He robed himself in humanity got up on that cross and let himself be abused by these people. All for what? For people that did not care about him, for people that did not know anything about, people that didn't regard him, people like me, people like you who don't want nothing to do with him. He died. He sacrificed himself. He went above and beyond everything for us. So just like Jonah was, I don't want to go for these people. No, Jesus did that for us. That's the sacrifice that we're talking about. That's what we're calling for. Christ did that for us. We were the sinners, and Christ died for us. So Nineveh symbolized the difficult tasks we avoid. That's what Nineveh is symbolizing for us today. Nineveh is that conversation we don't want to have, right? The injustice we don't want to confront, or the responsibility we wish you could escape. That's what Nineveh is for us today. And if we think about the story of the Good Samaritan, which is found in Luke 10, 25 to 27. For those that don't know, this is a very short version of that. You can go and read the story. It's about an unnamed man, Jew, that was attacked and robbed when he was journeying from Jerusalem to Jericho. And in that story, there's a priest, there's a Levite, there's a Samaritan, and of course, once we leave out, there's the innkeeper, because the innkeeper also had a role in this story as well. But I'm not going to get too far in the story. What I want to focus on from that story of the Good Samaritan is the priest and the Levite. So in that story, the priest and the Levite, they see the man bleeding, dying on the Jericho road. And they pass by. The priest walks on the other side. The Levite just passes by, doesn't offer no help. But they leave the man there. And that's the part I want to focus on. The priest and the Levite, they were well within their rights to do so. Their religion, their custom of the day required that they keep themselves separate. They can't be mixed up with blood. They can't be mixed up with the dead. They can't handle it. They can't touch it. So religion told them that, required them to walk away, don't get involved, do not lend a hand, do not extend yourself, do not go above and beyond it. So they were right in their religiosity to say, I am not going to stay here. I need to remove myself from this situation. Then there's the Good Samaritan, who is a Samaritan, and they're hated by the Jews. They don't mix, they don't mingle together, they stay in separate places. And the Good Samaritan had also good reasons. Their customs as well would allow them to walk past this Jewish person and continue on their way. They don't mix with them, they don't touch them, they don't get involved. And the Good Samaritan very well could have kept walking by. But the Good Samaritan stops and he helps the individual. And they bring them, to the inn, and they ask the innkeeper to take care of them, and anything that is above and beyond from money that is required, the Good Samaritan says, I will come back and I will pay it. Right? But the point of the story is that God is requiring us, right, to move away from religion. Right? Customs will say, we make all these barriers with denominations and all these different kind of things and faiths. God is saying, yes, the religion is there, the barrier is there, the wall is there, but move beyond that. See beyond that. Stretch yourself beyond that. Think, the other side of that coin, you being the person bleeding and dying on the Jericho road. See yourself as that person. Wouldn't you want someone to help you? Wouldn't you want someone to reach out to you? Wouldn't you want someone to save you? And that is what the message is, that wants to reach out beyond these blinders that we put on, and we justify in ourselves and say, well, you know what? I have a right, and this is what I'm called to do. Move beyond that and move in love. the love of God and see your neighbor. Not the question, who is your neighbor? See your neighbor. But I'm getting off topic here. I'm getting off topic. So I'm gonna move on from that. But don't be like the priest and the Levite, right? That's the message in that. Do not be like the priest or the Levite. So, question. So I want us to write down these 2 questions. So get a pen, get a piece of paper, just like last class. We want to leave you with something to think about, that's going to resonate with you. So question number 1. Do you avoid certain people, groups, or places because they challenge your religion or belief? So again, do you avoid certain people, groups, or places because they challenge your religion or belief? Question number 2, who is your Nineveh? Right? Remember we said before, Nineveh was those things that we avoid. We don't want to go to. We don't want to talk about. Who is your Nineveh? So that could be anyone from the sister in your church that you don't want to greet. So you make sure you're on the other side of that church so you don't even come in contact with them. It could even be a co-worker that you make sure you do not have the same shift as that person. You go out of your way so much so that if it means you having less shift and make less money, you are okay with that as long as you do not have to be in that same place as that particular coworker. That is your Nineveh. That is your Nineveh. So who is your Nineveh? Write those down. But as I said, don't just write down the first things that come. Take a moment. Let it sit with you. Pray about it. Think about it. And let God reveal himself to you and show you them to understand who you are. So those are our 2 questions, possibly homework. And so final. So Nineveh wasn't beyond redemption. They were never beyond. No one is beyond redemption. But Jonah's challenge in all of this wasn't the city. It was his own heart. The challenge was how Jonah saw Nineveh. He had something perceived in his mind and he could not get that picture out. And if this is who he was to Jonah, it was just who they were. And he couldn't understand. He couldn't reconcile. He couldn't look past anything. Or even what God was saying or God was doing, he couldn't open his mind to anything because his heart was so crowded and clouded and blocked by so much prejudice and bias, even though it was warranted. Right? Back to the priest and the Levite. Even though it was warranted and he had rights, right? He still could not look past his own heart. So, if this teaching spoke to you, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to Kassandra's Bible Corner. I would love to hear your comments on what you thought about chapter 2 in the book for those who read it. For those who haven't, I'd love to hear your comments on chapter 2 of this teaching. So write your comments, even the answers if you wanted to the questions that I put there. You can put it all below in the comments. If you would like a copy of the book, details are in the description. It's available in hard copy as well as digital formats. So see you in the next class. Remember, real people, real failures, a real God.